Okay, the goal of this video is understanding decimals. Before we move into doing all the math operations that we've talked about with decimals, it's important just to understand what they are and what they represent. So we're going to start by returning back to place value. Now we're going to take the digit 4. Okay, 4 is going to be our digit of the day here. And we're going to take a look at what happens when I place the digit 4 into each of these different place values. Okay, so if I place it here in the thousands place, notice that there's kind of some empty spaces here, right? We use zeros. There's nothing else in the hundreds place, the tens place, the ones place. We call this the placeholder 0. Okay, so if I put the 4 in the thousands place, notice I have 4,000, right? What happens if I move it over to the hundreds place? Well, now I only need 2 placeholders. We have 400. Okay, if I move it to the tens place, now it represents 40, right? 4 tens. And then finally, if I move it to the ones place, it just represents 4 because it's 4 ones. So what's happening each time I move over one spot to the right? Like I move this 4 over one spot. It goes from being worth 4,000 to now representing 400. What math did we do there? Well, remember that our whole number system is based on the number 10, right? So when we move one place value to the right, we're dividing by 10, right? I could show this with division, or I could show it with fractions, right? 4,000 divided by 10, well, that's 400, okay? And then that pattern continues. I divide by 10. So now I take 400 and I divide by 10, right? Remember we talked about reducing these fractions. If I see zeros, I cross them off. So now it is 40, right? We're just dividing by 10 each time. And then 40 divided by 10 gets me 4. Okay, so now we're at the ones place. And the question now is, well, what happens if I keep going to the right? Well, the pattern continues. So what happens if I take 4 and I divide it by 10? 4 divided by 10. I could just leave it like that, right? That's a fraction. What would I call this fraction? 4/10. Okay, so if we were to continue this chart, right here after the ones place is where we put the decimal point. Okay, decimal point goes right here. And the place value after is the tenths place, right? Because of this pattern, we're dividing by 10 each time we move to the right. So now here, if I put a 4 in the tenths place, I need to put the decimal point. Okay, and then we could put a 0 here as well in the ones place. You don't have to, but oftentimes you'll see it written. So oftentimes people would say this is 0.4, right? But we can also say it's 4/10. Just like this is 4,000, 400. This is 40, 4 ones, right? But 4/10. Okay, what happens if I go even one spot further to the right? Okay, instead of 0.4, it would be 0.04. Just like we have placeholder zeros here on the left side of the decimal point, like for 4,000, right? We have these 3 zeros. If we have a number on the right side of the decimal point, like here, we need to put a placeholder 0. So that way we can tell the difference between 0.4, 4/10, and 0.04, which we'll talk about what that is. So I've now divided by 10. If I take a number and I divide by 10, and then I divide by 10 again, right? That's like dividing by 100. Okay, so this here is like taking my 4 and I'm dividing it by 100 now. So if I have 0.04, this next place value over is the hundredths place. Okay, now you may notice some similarity. It's almost like a mirror, right? Over here, I see tenths and hundredths. Okay? Do I see something similar on the left side? Yes, I see tens and hundreds, right? There's no oneths place. So this is sort of like the middle of the mirror, but after that, right, notice tens, tenths, hundreds, hundredths. What do you think is going to come next here? Just like we have thousands, thousandths. Thousandths. Okay? So if I take our 4 and finally I put it here and we have 0.004, okay? That is 4 thousandths. Now another thing that you might have noticed, we know right now what the relationship is between decimal values and fractions. If I can just say the decimal properly, then I know how to write it as a fraction. So let's review that real quick. How would I say this decimal? Well, we want to look at the last place value that has a digit in it, which in this case is the hundredths place, right? So then we just read this number, 56. Well, 56 what? 56 hundredths. What would that look like as a fraction? 56, and if I have hundredths, that means my denominator is 100, okay? And as we've seen, all right, let's change up our digit. So now I have a 7, and what place value is that in? It's in the thousandths place. So how would I say this? Well, it's 7 thousandths. That would be 7 out of 1,000. Okay? Up until now in our videos, we've only been talking about whole numbers. But we deal with decimals a lot, not only in math, in our real life, right? I think the most common example is money. And so there's one other important point I wanted to make regarding that, which is there any difference between $4 written like that and $4.00? No, there's not, right? They're both $4. So anytime we have a whole numbers, that just means there's nothing in all of these place values on the right side of the decimal. But if we wanted to, we can write the decimal point, and we just know that must mean it's all zeros, okay? And I could keep going forever and ever and ever. On the topic of going forever and ever and ever, the place values to the right and to the left would continue forever, right? After the thousands, we have the 10,000s, okay? The 10,000s. I'm going to abbreviate a little bit here. And then after the 10,000s, right, we have the 100,000s. After this, we would have millions. And what do you think we would have after that? Well, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions. Now we go to 10 millions. Okay, and this would just go on and on and on. Billions, trillions. But the pattern is exactly the same on the other side as well. What do you think comes to the right of the thousands place? Well, we have thousands, then 10,000s. So this would be thousandths, and then 10 thousandths, right? 10 thousandths. So we don't necessarily need to know the name of every single place value, but it is important to understand that they go on and on in both directions, right? And again, what's the relationship between the ones and the tens? Well, if I want to go from the 10, if I take a digit like 4 from the tens to the ones place, I'm dividing it by 10. So when I move a digit, when we go one spot to the right, that's like dividing by 10. But that also means that if we move one spot to the left, that's like multiplying by 10, okay? So the last thing we're going to talk about is how can we use everything we've talked about here to compare two decimals and understand which one might be larger. We're also going to take a look at visualizing decimals on the number line as well. Okay, so here on a number line, I've just zoomed in on the space between 0 and 1. Because when we're dealing with decimal values, we're dealing with values that are less than 1, right? Like 75 cents is less than $1, okay? So we could also write 1, remember, as 1.00. I could put as many zeros as I want, but let's just leave it at 2. Let's just go to the hundredths place, okay? So let's think about where 1/10 would go on this number line. Well, when I'm dealing with tenths, that means I'm breaking every one whole into 10 pieces. So let's cut it in half, and then I have to break each of these into 5 pieces. I could do much better than that in terms of evenness. Okay. Okay, so notice now I've broken it into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tenths, right? So 1/10 would be right here, okay? Where would 9/10 be? Well, if 1/10 is here, that's 2, 3, 4/10, 5, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, right? So it would go right here. We could also have thought about, well, 1 is equal to 10/10, right? So 9/10 is just 1/10 backwards. Okay, but where would this go on the number line? How do we say this? This is 1/100th, okay? Well, when I'm dealing with hundredths, instead of thinking about breaking every whole into 10 parts, we're breaking it into 100 parts, which means each of these needs to be broken into 10. So I would then break this tenth into 10 pieces. And this right here, that's 1/100th, okay? 2/100ths, 3/100ths, 4/100ths, 5/100ths, 6/100ths, 7/100ths, 8/100ths, 9/100ths, 10/100ths, right? If we write it like that, now it's 10/100ths. Okay, so let's take 2 more decimals and try to place them on the number line. Look at them a couple different ways to understand how do I know which one is larger. Okay, so we're going to be comparing 0.5 and 0.35. Okay, now sometimes people say, well, 35, right? 35 is bigger than 5. So I might think that this decimal is larger, but that's not true. Okay, let's think about this in a couple ways. First, let's write these as fractions. Well, how do I say these? This is 5/10. So 5/10. This right here, 35/100ths. 35/100ths. Why can I not really compare these fractions right now? Because they don't have common denominators. But I could find one, right? 100 would be my common denominator. So if I multiply by 10, this 5/10 is also equivalent to 50/100ths, right? 5/10 is the same as 50/100ths, okay? And then 35/100ths, right? Now that they're both hundredths, it's easier to think about and to see that, well, 50 is more than 35, right? 50/100ths would be greater than 35/100ths, okay? You'll also notice here, I just added a 0. It can be easier to, again, to compare when they have the same number of digits. So if we have an empty space here, we could just use a placeholder 0 to make it easier visually to compare. Okay, on the number line, where would these go? Well, 5/10 or 50/100ths is right here. 0.1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths, 0.5, right? 5 tenths goes right here. Okay, so if 3 tenths or 0.3 is here and 4 tenths, 0.4 is here, where would 35 hundredths go? Okay, it's a little easier to visualize if we think, remember that this is also 40 hundredths if we want to think about it that way. And this is 30 hundredths. So where's 35? Well, 35 is halfway between 30 and 40, so that's the same here. Okay, 35 hundredths would go right here. So I hope this video has been helpful to you as far as understanding a little better about what exactly decimals are and what they represent. In the next videos, we will go back over all the basic operations and how do we do them with decimals. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.